This started in '64 when I joined the Farmer magazine after an internship on Nebraska Farmer. And good fortune was that they flew us up to Minneapolis for an interview. First time on an airplane, spilled orange juice on Chick Kircher, the editor-in-chief, during the interview breakfast, and still got the job. And then worked on the Farmer for a number of years, moved over to a new magazine, Farm Industry News, as managing editor, and from there to the publisher, or the editorship, then a publisher role, and then over to Big Farmer magazine, back to Webb as editorial director of our Creative Services Custom Publishing division, back to editor of the Farmer, and then into management for, at that time, Entertech, and running the Ag Group and 22 other publications in various other groups. So it was a long career, starting with agricultural journalism and writing, and the most interesting facet of that was once being sitting down and having a drink with the editor of the Missouri Ruralist, Cordell Tyndall. And after this, and he was long retired at this point, he asked, what was the best part of your career? And it pleased him immensely, and he often told the story afterwards. I said, being an associate editor. Actually, the most fun was the writing and the covering of farm stories. I think the most important part was in the early years. In those early '60s, not many writers got to go, or associate editors. Mostly it was the editor-in-chiefs and a few managing editors. It was kind of an elite organization. And shortly after I got to go, because I won a Young Writer Award that they had at the time, other younger people were starting to come. And it didn't take time at all. That generation let the younger people come and join, and the organization became much more virile, and young Turks meeting in the corner all night, drinking a little too much and saying, you know, if we could only run this thing, we could do a great job and change the world. And when we got our chance, we found out that those old boys were really smart and ran a hell of a nice organization. They were brilliant, much more formal. As the writing became less formal, we used to start every story. Every farmer was Mr. Every cut line had to fit in the margin. Our headlines were hand counted by half points to make sure they fit square in the sides. And the technology then changed so much into today's computerized, computer-to-plate publishing, etc., etc., etc. I'll start with the bad. The bad is editors and writers today in particular are under too much pressure to deliver a lot of copy for both the internet and the various media, electronic media, newsletters, etc., as well as running their magazine. The use of professional photographers has been reduced considerably. The workload is tremendous. And it's different. When we wrote, it was not unusual back in the early days to go on the road for a week, get 2 stories a day, come back and write them, go back on the road. Today's different, lot done by telephone, less travel, less connection, less experience on farm, more people that don't have an agricultural background, which is fine, but it takes more training and more time. Better writers from the standpoint of understanding technology. So it's just change, and I think we should expect it, and you're going to see a lot more of it. The good was not just on the writing side, but I found it very interesting as I got into different sectors of magazines, automotive, trucking, health, security, government, various other groups I had. Only in agriculture were competitors friendly toward each other. Editors met like this. They talked to each other, they shared ideas, just like farmers gave away their information free. It was fun to be with your competition, and the association had a lot to do with that. But it is almost unique. Some of those industries, they virtually despise each other, and we were just as competitive, but we were friendly. Well, Farm Industry News wanted a unique spot in product news, and we had a lot of ethical questions about how we do that. But what was happening in the industry was the reason that the magazine could go forward, and that was Extension and the university people were our fountain of information and unbiased information in magazines, and still are. But the Extension service kept getting slashed and reduced. County agents were less on the farm, more involved in other social programs. Extension had their budget cut year after year. Marketing people, companies were starting to produce more and more research and letting people have it. They would share their research, and a lot of times it was done with universities, and it wasn't hard to start finding credibility in some of the commercial research and the commercial people, the agronomists. They become much more of an expert, and were a source of information we were missing. I think we did some things that were unusual in that we started using commercial sources for information. That was point one. And this will go back again to history. When I joined the Farmer magazine, if you had a tractor on the cover, say it was a John Deere, we airbrushed out the John Deere. If a farmer had a logo, seed corn hat, we brushed that out, airbrushed it so that we had no commercialism. It was pure as driven snow. And it should have been in those days. But as the times changed, you just needed more contacts, a bigger breadth. Technology was changing. Companies were getting fewer and bigger with more research capabilities, better PR people, properly labeled. Some commercialization information is necessary. How do you report on the new tractor? Everybody did it, but they didn't say they were doing it. Now you can say, we got this at a John Deere press conference, or we're upfront about it, and we need to be even more upfront. It's a legitimate source as long as you're not trying to fool the reader. To stay relevant today, I think AAEA needs to consider doing some research in a couple of subject areas. Maybe use a little foundation money to, one, better tell publishers and management what editors do, how they do it, get the salaries up a little bit. Let's get writers, and particularly the writers. Management's kind of okay, but the writers are underpaid for their value, and it's a really hard thing to crush because so many of the bigger companies, and most of our publishing companies are big now, work in salary brackets, and they do surveys with each other that come out with your salary. Some people are worth a hell of a lot more than they're getting paid, and their credibility and their work is not always recognized appropriately. AAEA needs to continue its awards program. I would go forward with even more awards and more publicity about those awards. Let's make it more important to win one, even if we had to get somebody to do the PR for us because we're a little too pure. We don't blow our own horn enough. Some of the things that helped in my career was the experiences on the Farmer magazine with investigative reporting, which kind of went away. And that was led by Bob Rupp, who we talked to later. But there was some very intense investigative reporting done that saved farmers millions of dollars in the Jerusalem artichokes, for example. And there are many more examples. Farm Journal did some on the mafia and meatpacking business. It took a lot of guts, it took a lot of money, and we stood the threat of absolutely being sued for libel. Got a court order that we couldn't publish, reversed that court order, got our stories published. Later on, a newspaper journalist won a Pulitzer Prize on the same story we had already published in the Farmer magazine. Mm-hmm. That was a great help because you learn how to dig deep. One of the things I'd like to see the association do is a kind of a short course. One of the wonderful things that happened to me when I was young and helped my career was I made an effort to understand a little bit or a lot about production, a little bit about circulation, a little bit about publishing, a little bit about advertising, a little bit about all human relations. Spent some time in what was then the personnel department, learning what they do. Took a mini MBA on business management. You have to expand beyond the writing stage to really understand the publishing atmosphere you're working in. The best thing to be is a writer forever, but if you want to take some other routes without knowing how they work, you limit your career opportunities. It will help you grow as a writer or an editor too, to understand, a salesman don't do anything. All they do is drive around and have good meals. If you understand what they do, it changes you. The editor is always, what a soft job. You write a couple editorials and talk to people and get to go to all the good meetings. And once you're in that chair, man, there isn't time to have coffee. It's a very difficult situation, and you can't appreciate that unless you sit down and talk to the other segments of this industry, your industry.